Since taking office a month ago, President Trump has threatened to withhold federal money to Maine unless it complies with its executive order banning transgender women from playing on women's sports teams. He has also signed an executive order that bans transgender people from serving openly in the military, and another stating that the federal government will recognize only two sexes and that sexes are not changeable.
Jennifer Finney Boylan, a transgender woman who has lived in Maine for more than 35 years, says that after the president signed one of those orders, she was surprised to wake up in her own bed and learn that she was a man again. Boylan is a best-selling writer who has a new book out called Cleavage: Men, Women, and the Space Between Us. It is the 5th memoir she has written, and as she says, that's a lot of memoir. But Boylan says since her transition 25 years ago, much has changed, both in America and in her own life. So when you sat down and started thinking about this book, what in general were the kinds of stories that you wanted to tell?
Well, in some ways, I wanted to talk about the difference between coming out now and coming out then, because in some ways things were harder then because it was such unknown territory, but it was also easier then because no one had yet been given formal instructions on how to hate me. But I also just wanted to talk about the difference between the lives that men live and women live, as I've experienced it.
You know that what is supposed to be a curse, may you live in interesting times. For trans people, these are interesting times.
These are interesting times. And it's a shame because I think to some degree people have, well, they've been taught to turn against support for people like me because they have been invited to believe things that are not true. I have to tell you, I don't want to play soccer against your daughter. I don't want to give hormones to your infant son. Mostly what I want is to be left alone and to live the life that I fought so very hard to live. I think most people who object to transgender people in some way have really never spent much time with us. And that's one thing I hope that Cleavage will do. It's a book that will enable you to get to know someone like me a little bit better.
Why do you think it has gotten so politicized that politicians are using this to make hay?
I think because we're a very, very small minority that it's easy to pick on.
Are you optimistic that things are going to get better in the next 4 years, or are you deeply fearful of what may lie ahead?
I'm fearful, and not just for what lies ahead, but for what has already happened. It's very strange to wake up and know that there is a target painted on your back, on your front, in fact. I don't know that I'll be around when the world that I dream of comes into being, but I know I'm going to be fighting for it in the meantime. And all of us have to fight for it.
The title, Cleavage, you explain the word that it comes from, to cleave, which, as you point out, has two different meanings: to divide, to split, or to bring closer and to adhere. I had not known this is words like that with opposite meanings are called contronyms.
Contronyms.
And you write that at times you feel as if your life has been a contronym.
In a way, that's true, because I have both been, well, as we began, the control and the experiment as well. I've looked at life from both sides now. Being trans in some ways was a curse. It was a thing that I really struggled with. It's not an easy life. It's hard. And yet, it's also a life, it turned out to be a gift because it gave me stories to tell that had not been told before. It also gave me the chance to see, on a good day, like how kind people could be, how generous people could be.
There are a lot of people who will never read this book, but they will see the front cover of it, and it will grab their attention.
It will grab their attention.
And this photo, putting this photo on the cover, was your idea?
It was my idea. Originally it was kind of a joke, because my publisher had a bunch of relatively literary, kind of evocative titles, like A Heart Torn in Half and things like that. And I was like, come on now, you gotta, let's pep it up. So I sent my publisher a half a dozen supposedly funny ideas, and they loved this one. And then I was like, no, I was just kidding. And they're like, no, we're gonna use it. So I don't know. I just hope that people don't think it's a book about breasts.
Your life has given you a lot of stories, and that part is not arguable. A sentiment that I come back to a lot is, I think you maybe told it to me the first time I interviewed you more than 20 years ago, and it came from your mom, and you repeat it in this book, which is, it's impossible to hate anyone whose story you know.
She also said, when I came out as trans, she quoted 1 Corinthians, and then she said, love will prevail. And I've tried to make that my mantra too, love will prevail. And in these times, when it feels as if something other than love is prevailing, it's good to remember that prevail doesn't mean something necessarily that's going to happen this afternoon. It means something that will happen with time, with patience, and with love.
And just to add a little more to that story, it was not easy for Jennifer Finney Boylan to come out as trans to her mother, who was a conservative Republican and an evangelical Christian. But when she did, her mother said, I would never turn my back on my child. And then she quoted from the Bible, 1 Corinthians, as you heard, saying to Jenny, these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
So powerful, so powerful. This is a book title you're likely not to forget. But again, the name of Jennifer Finney Boylan's new book is Cleavage.